Why, hello. In this video, I'm going to go over what you need to know to start a private practice in a very simple and easy to understand, but comprehensive checklist. My name is Bruce Bassi. I'm an addiction psychiatrist in outpatient private practice, and I really enjoy helping people get started starting their own practices. I do have a course in the description below if you're interested, and even more comprehensive look at what it takes to start a private practice. So check out the links below. The first section of the checklist is going to go over the business structure, and I would always recommend that you contact and develop a relationship with a lawyer and an accountant who you trust and can count on, who would give you advice specific to your situation. I'm not providing legal or accounting advice. The first thing you want to do is think about the business structure, and that's different than how it's taxed. Obviously, when you're talking about a business structure, you're talking about either a sole proprietorship, LLC, or a corporation. An LLC could in fact be taxed as an S corporation. Structure of the business really kind of changes what you are going to be submitting to the Secretary of State and also what your internal documents would show too. In regard to the business name, I would suggest that you seek the advice of a lawyer who can also tell you what the business name requirements are in your state for the legal business name and for the doing business as name so that you don't have to change it in the future. There may be requirements about putting your name in there or putting the purpose of the business in the name of the business itself. After you're done and satisfied with what the name of the business is, you're going to then file the articles of organization if you're LLC or the articles of incorporation if you're going to be a C Corp/S Corp. A lawyer in their office may help you with the paperwork to submit to the Secretary of State and also may serve as a registered agent. You need a registered agent to submit the paperwork over to the Secretary of State. You're going to also need a mailing address, so you're going to think about whether or not you want to be a virtual practice or if you're going to look for a physical office space. If you're going to be looking for a physical office space, where is it going to be located? Are you going to purchase it? Are you going to get a lease? How visible is it going to be? What kind of privacy do you have? If you do end up renting an office, the downside to that is that you may have to move eventually in a couple of years, but that's not a big deal. That's not at the end of the world, and that could be done. Also, if you're looking to purchase office space, what you're going to need is a certificate of use from the city, because most likely your liability insurance is going to require that you have a zoning certificate, which you would get from the city. And then before you start applying to insurance companies, you're going to need a bank account. In order to get a bank account, you need a tax ID. So you're going to go to the IRS website to get that and keep in mind what your NAICS codes and write those down. Keep track of all your codes and date of organization. Other companies are going to ask about these codes for applications and whatnot, so you're going to want to keep those organized. And also keep track of any forms that you get from the IRS and the forms from the Secretary of State as well. If you're going to elect to be an S Corp, which would save you payroll taxes, you're going to need a payroll service, so you're going to want to start looking through payroll services. And in order to set up payroll, you need withholding accounts and unemployment accounts in your state, so you're going to want to go to the State Department of Revenue office website and then create accounts for that. And since you already have an EIN, that's going to lead into the financial checklist. And so you're going to want to get a business bank account, look out for any sort of promotionals that might be going on. So you can get free money for opening a business checking account. And you're also going to need a business credit card. You want to keep your accounts separate so that you're not intermingling assets and purchasing business items on your personal credit card. So you're going to need your own separate business credit card. You're going to also want to register for a group NPI number. You would go onto the NPPES website. You're going to find a bookkeeper or an accountant. That could be pretty difficult. You don't really know what it's like working with that person until you go a few months in to kind of see what their timeline is like and how quickly they respond to questions and messages. And that could be pretty difficult and frustrating. I've gone through a couple of bookkeepers before in the past. And in order to generate claims and send them out and have them come back as an ERA, you're going to need a clearinghouse to interface with them. But we'll discuss that a little bit more in the EHR section. You're also going to want to start looking at billing services, which typically charge between 4 and 5% of collected revenue. Charm's EHR system has what's called a revenue cycle management service, where you essentially see a patient, generate an invoice, then send it over to the RCM or revenue cycle management service, which would then handle everything in the entire revenue cycle from scrubbing the claim and sending it over to insurance, and then evaluating the ERA when it comes back. In terms of the BAA checklist, this is going to be a HIPAA requirement for any sort of company that you're working with that has your PHI that's either being stored or transmitted within that company. So a business associates agreement is essentially a legal promise that says the company that stores your PHI is going to abide by all the rules of HIPAA and whatnot. So that's going to include your EHR system, your email system, your fax system, etc. When starting off to choose an EHR system, you want to think about what are the most important features that you want to see in the EHR system, whether or not that's customizable reports, customizable consent forms, etc. I have separate videos on how to evaluate an EHR system, and I also do that in my course too. When you're choosing an email system, you want to think about one that can potentially integrate with other services. So you might want to go with a larger email system. Most email systems are not HIPAA compliant by default, so you have to purchase an additional layer of email security on top of that. We use PowBox, and there's a link in the description of the video if you want $250 off after you sign up. but it's fairly affordable though. It's only $29 per month for the first 10 accounts, and it gives you totally secure HIPAA compliant email, which is, I think, essential these days. But you're also going to need a HIPAA compliant fax and phone system. A lot of phone systems include fax with it. Charm also has a fax system included with it. We use 8x8, which offers a BAA for HIPAA compliance. They're a little bit more expensive, but I like a lot of their features. If you're interested in going with 8x8, I do have a link to that below. There's other cheaper alternatives such as RingRx. You might want to consider a form system too to collect patient information both from your website and also when you send them the consent forms and intake forms. We use a system called Jotform. They've been around for quite a bit of time now, and they allow you to customize the forms and integrate it with Google Workspace if you're going to be using that. And it makes it very easy to put it onto the website. And then that way you just have to worry about a HIPAA compliant system with Jotform because they're entering that information directly into Jotform. Then looking at your insurance checklist, obviously you're going to need malpractice insurance, and there might be state-specific limits there. Insurance companies might have their own limits. Usually it's 1 million per occurrence and then 3 million for the policy term. If you're going to have employees in the future, you can consider EPLI insurance, but that's not a requirement up front. Then there's liability insurance for the building, workers' comp, depending on the number of employees you have, and then depending on the state, but you can also get an exemption for that too. Disability insurance is not a requirement to start seeing patients, but probably highly recommended, especially if you have family who are counting on your income. And in order to get over to insurance companies and start getting paneled by insurance companies, you need a CAQH account. And if you just Google CAQH, you can start working through that application. Essentially, that stores all of your demographic information, and then insurance companies will pull from that in order to start the credentialing process for you. Now we're finally starting to get closer to seeing patients. You're going to want to develop a policies checklist, which includes a consent form, an intake form, and then also an internal set of clinic policies and procedures, which you're probably going to end up revising for the next few months down the road. That's not a necessity right up front, but obviously once you start to have more employees, they're going to want to know what your policies are, and you're going to legally need to be keeping them consistent among different employees. So you're going to definitely want policies that you feel comfortable with, and it wouldn't hurt to get started on that now. Make sure that there's no errors in these. You're also going to want to test out your form system from Jotform. Make sure that there's no errors with this when patients start to submit their information, and there's no sort of difficulties or issues downloading that information, and make sure it all runs smoothly. In terms of marketing checklist, obviously you'd want to start considering a logo and let it settle in and see if you like it before you put it anywhere, because you don't want to have to change that later. So find a professional graphic designer, give them sort of inspiration ideas so that they know what to go off of, and then they can give you a few different ideas. You can select the one you like and then maybe sort of make some adjustments to that before creating a lot of different varieties of that would go on letterhead, business cards, paperwork, shirts, pens, holders, things like that, signage. So the graphic designer would be able to give you a black and white format and different formats that you can use in these different varieties, and then eventually put it on your website. So then the checklist goes over starting a website, and obviously that could be a pretty complex endeavor. Whether or not you want to do it yourself versus hire out, it can really change what your budget's going to be on this. So web development obviously is a career path in itself. It's very complex. You have to choose which web hosting service you want, what kind of web security you want, what kind of platform you want it to be running, if you want it WordPress or not. And then within WordPress, what kind of design software, design system you want to use on top of that, whether it's Divi or Oxygen or what have you. Obviously, web development is a very complex field, and there are people who dedicate their careers to this. So you can have somebody do it entirely and just give them content to put on the website, or you can choose everything yourself, and you can choose which web hosting service you want, and that has a lot of options that you're going to have to select from. I would suggest that you choose a web hosting service that can run WordPress on it, so that way it gives you a lot more flexibility for SEO and design options later on. And when you have WordPress, you can choose a design system on top of that, whether or not you want to install Divi to help you with design or Oxygen. And those are two different design platforms that you can use as a user to start to easily develop the website, and they have a lot of templates included in them too. So after the website gets up and running, you're going to want to think about SEO. And this is also another career path in itself, and depending on how much you want to save, you can do it yourself, but that requires that you research it and continue to work on the analysis of it and continue to upkeep it and develop a blog. But there's contractors who you could potentially use to hire to help you with this. And if you wanted to go onto Fiverr, you can do it that way. And then your workflow checklist to kind of consider what a patient's experience is like when they first call, to when they're doing the consent forms, to when you get the intake forms, how they get put on your schedule and your calendar, what's your schedule going to be, what's it going to look like to them, handling how they make a follow-up appointment, handling reviews and feedback, and your own reputation management on the internet, and also any sort of EHR customizations that you have to tinker with, whether or not that's quick text or templates, your e-prescribing system, your lab system, your claims systems. All of that stuff requires a deep dive that you understand what are all the settings that are available to you in the EHR system, and you feel like they're meeting your needs too. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you're interested in more information on this, I do have a course and I also have other free videos if you want to check out too. Please feel free to subscribe for more videos, hit the notification bell, and let me know in the comments below where you're at in terms of the process of starting your own private practice. I'd be really curious to know and how I can be more helpful to you. Thanks a lot.